everyone, welcome to my mini series of Process Chat, where I bring conversations surrounding getting started in business, exit planning, and everything in between. I'm Adriana, your operational guide to helping you build processes so you can focus on progress. Today's episode is about building systems through uncertainty. So before I really dive into this segment, I want to do a recap of last week's episode about systems. So I'm going to pull up my little handy dandy image, but if you're just tuning in to the audio, I'll of course break that down too, but feel free to catch the last episode that really broke down what systems are and all that good stuff. So let me do that. But overall, at its core, systems are nothing more than a group of all of our processes. So think all of the step-by-step actions you take to achieve a particular goal, all that grouped in, standard operating procedures, tools, resources, all that jazz. So that's all systems are. Like, they're literally just a bunch of processes and all the stuff that support the process. So like last week, I was talking about the three key things, and I have like a house image. So we have the foundation, which is the core business systems, which again, I talked about like the main things all businesses have, which is like the sales, marketing, all that jazz. And then the subsystems is what I like to call the secondary, third, all that jazz systems within that core system. So like, again, I talked about marketing and like promoting on social media and all that good stuff, and like breaking it down further, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that stuff. So like the subsystems is just like the things that support the core system, but they're broken down even more. So you can break down the processes for that particular subsystem, all that jazz. And then we have at the top, the roof, the business vision. So like whatever goal you're working towards and whatever task, like whatever you're working towards, that's what the top part is, the roof. Like the vision, like if you're launching something, that goes there, hiring, scaling. Again, feel free to check out the last episode where I broke this down a little bit more, but it's the main overview. So today we're focusing on change, risk, and crisis management. The systems of that. So looking at it from a process level, it's more so looking at it, well, for me, it's easier to look at things from the step-by-step process that we're taking. So the easier ones to break down is the change system, the change management. And the only reason why that one's a little bit easier is because systems, again, are like the process that you're doing, usually on a repeated level. And a repeated level doesn't have to be like every day. It's just something that you may do occasionally, but you do it consistently. You do something consistently, and those processes make up the system. So with change management, it's easier to implement the change when you're already doing something on a regular basis, because all you're doing is changing the vision a little bit and you're changing the tools and resources. So like an example here for change management, I'm going to turn this off because there's nothing about change management and stuff here. So what you're doing essentially there is just changing your process end goal from maybe doing things in Google documents or Word documents, and you're putting it into software. So like you're changing from doing everything in a document into an actual software. And the change comes in with the adjustment periods, like maybe adjusting the vision. And instead of like doing things when you're doing in the document, you're doing things for the software. So like you're just trying to adjust to that. So building out processes for change is a lot easier because you're improving. There we go. I was trying to think of the term. You're improving what you're already doing, and you're just creating new rules and policies surrounding that process you are already doing. So like it's easier to plan for change because hopefully it's something they're already doing. But like if it's something that you're not doing, where like risk and crisis and stuff comes in as well, it's a little bit harder to plan because it's not something that you're doing. So like you're really just pulling into like the what ifs and like the what could happen, not dream, I'm trying to say, but like I cannot think of the term I want to use for that. But it's something that it doesn't exist yet, pretty much. And when you're documenting different systems and stuff, usually stuff that already exists, but like when it comes to like risk, crisis and stuff, you're pulling things from like the vision that you have. There we go. You pulling things from the vision. So it's like it's not real yet, but like if it does happen, like what does that process look like? So that's where everything falls in. But change is a little bit easier because you're just improving. Hopefully, we're just going to talk like we're in a perfect world. You're hopefully improving a process that you already set, and you're just improving that and just implementing different processes for that switch. And that gets me into risk and crisis management. So identifying risk. So, like I mentioned, systems are nothing more than the processes that we're doing and all the things that support it. So, something I like to do, and I show this for it is for everybody, like for a process consultant, I'm gonna show you guys too, and I'll read it for those that are listening. Let me see. So, whenever you're building out systems, again, I like breaking mine up into subsystems and stuff. That's just how I operate and how I do things. People may do it differently, but how I do, I break it down by like the subsystem and focus on whatever needs to be identified. So, you have your processes within the systems. Again, the processes are the step-by-step actions. We're looking at every little thing that you're doing inside that business and whatever steps you're doing, all the goals, the to-do list, whatever you want to name it. We're looking at all of that, looking at the step-by-step process. And for each of these, you're asking yourself 4 questions. So are you delegating this particular step to somebody? Is this a step that can be removed or paused? Is this a step that can be kept? Or is this a step that can be automated? So what I like to do for risk, I like to add risk as a part of, if I'm doing that anyway, risk as a part of the system building or documentation and stuff or improvement, whatever I'm doing for that. So you have the 4 main questions when you're adding in risk, like what's the risk of this process step? You just add that in. So pretty much like I just said, I already said, you add in what is the risk of this step. You can look at it as a whole, the whole process step, or you can look at it as like for the subsystem, whatever you want to look at. But overall, you're looking at each individual steps that you're taking inside business, and you're seeing what the risk could be. So like for me, I'm an online based company. So my risk would be like, what if I lose internet? I have had that happen when I was supposed to give a presentation. People already paid and everything. My power went out. So I had to have like a plan of action for that. That's more so honestly for crisis, but it could be for that too. But whenever you're planning for risk, because again, you can't fully, it's hard to document things when you haven't had it happen. So like when people have like these crisis, like in case of this happens, this, that, and the third, sometimes they've already had it happen in the past. So that's why they have policies and stuff on it already. In particular cases, most of the time, a lot of people have not been through a situation like that. So it's harder to really plan for things if you're not sure of what to expect. And whenever you're not sure what to expect, this is where adding risk into the 4 steps I have here, risk into the process, identifying like the process and stuff. Like if you're doing process improvement, there we go. If you're doing process improvement, so like if you have someone that does process improvement on your team, I highly recommend just adding in like a thing for risk. Like what's the risk of something happening within this process or subsystem, whatever. So when it comes to doing the risk, so like I was saying, I got chop it. So like I was talking about myself. So I'm an online based entrepreneur. So like my risk when I'm doing like the process and stuff, I look at more so of like the overall subsystems versus like individual, just because it's a lot easier for me to manage. But anyway, I'm looking at, okay, I'm online based. Like for example, I do online based workshops. So I have to have a plan of action. Like what's the worst that could happen? I've had something happen before, so I know what to plan now. But back then, I've never lost power during something. I've never had anything happen, but I know I'm an online based entrepreneur. So little things I had to identify was, okay, I'm online based. I run off the internet. What happens if the internet gets cut for the day or for a long time? Whenever a storm happens, I lose internet in the middle of something. Like what kind of policies, if I didn't mention that, policies are nothing more like the rules in business. So whatever rules you have in place, that's policies pretty much. Of course, you got to make sure they're compliant and everything. But anyway, so I was like, what kind of rules do I have in business policies, and what processes do I have that goes towards this that I can add in like the risk element. So it's just like I've never been through it before, but I can look through each of the steps I'm currently doing now, the steps I already have repeating everything, and figuring out what do I need to do next. And the same thing goes for any industry. It doesn't have to be like, again, it doesn't have to be like the individual stuff, but like you have your core systems, you have, again, like I call it subsystems, you may call it something else, I call it subsystems. You may look at that and you may look like, okay, I've had a client before, I don't work with too much e-commerce anymore, but like you guys have like the supply with supplier, distributors and all that good stuff, like figuring out, okay, I'm using this person, they supply 90% of my stock. What happens if they can no longer do it? So like having kind of like a plan of action. And one of my clients, one made it herself, but there's another one, like we had to figure out, okay, like things are going great, but like if something else happens, like where do you look at? Who do you keep in touch with? Things like that. Like who should you have in your network? So we added like an element of always be networking with people that work in the same industry. So that way, if something were to happen, it's easier to pivot like, hey, who do you use? Or, okay, I have this person on my back burner. Let me contact them and see if they're still in stock. But pretty much the thing for risk, you just want to always make sure you have a plan of action based on whatever processes that you're doing. So identifying risk, I feel that was really long, but pretty much identifying the risk is just a matter of going through your system. So this is where keeping a documented keeping a documentation of everything you're doing inside business, or at least a broad overview, comes into play, because it's hard to plan for risk if you're not really sure what's going on within your business. But overall, risk is just taking the processes and stuff and figuring out, asking yourself the 4 main questions, and also what's the risk of something happening here inside this process. Main gist of that. Okay, so like we have that, and next is planning the unknown. I like to call this for crisis management. Honestly, risk and crisis kind of not about the same, but they are kind of the same to me when it comes to planning. So like risk, you're going through the individual processes or subsystems to figure out like what's the risk of this happening. Wonder if something does happen, like what's next. So if you did not go through the processes of identifying the risk, you're kind of like in crisis mode. Not kind of, you're in crisis mode, or something happens. Like for me, I'll just use myself an example because I go back and forth. Like the difference between the risk and crisis, to me, risk was I already made a plan of action and kind of set it in stone and just like tried it out, or not tried it out, but I just kind of have something in the event something does happen. Crisis is when I didn't have a plan of action really, and I'm just like, okay, I got to figure out a way to adapt right now. So with crisis, one of the things, nothing super major, but I run online workshops and everything, and the power went out like an hour before the workshop, and service is spotty and stuff, so I couldn't get my operations manager or anybody in touch. So like I had to like really figure out like, okay, what can I do now to let people know that are going to be waiting for me soon, that I have no internet and I have no idea what's coming on. So just planning the crisis is just like, okay, what can I do next? Like, what can I do to adapt? So like for me, that just looked like going down the street where I actually had service, or contacting a neighbor and getting in contact with my operations manager so they could send out like an email saying that the thing's gonna be rescheduled because of my internet and blah, blah, blah. And because that happened, I now have like an actual policy in place. Like if I don't show up to my workshop within 10 minutes after it's starting, it's canceled and you will get a refund or whatever I have in place, this type of thing. But like when it comes to planning planning for this, again, it goes into, it just really just goes into how much you know about your business, and kind of like planning. It goes into like the risk management of things. Like you need to know what kind of risk you already have inside your business, like the process, like we just talked about. I spent a good bit talking about, and just knowing how to adapt because of what those risks are. So that's what the crisis management, to me, again, my opinion, that's what it looks like to me. Like you're identifying the risk and you're putting a straight plan of action. Like, okay, like in the event of this happening, this is what we need to do. And like, this is the process that we need to follow. And again, it's one of those things where you could put a plan in place, but until it actually happens, which you hope it doesn't, but until it actually happens, you want to already have something in place so you can execute it and just kind of make changes as you go. Because with these, it's like I said, it's really hard to figure out what exactly you need here. Oops, hit the wrong thing. It's really hard to figure out what you need here. Let me turn off this stuff because that's all I pretty much have when it comes to that. So the main thing, again, just to kind of recap, 'cause I feel like I put two risk and crisis together, but overall, the main thing out of this I want you to get is that as long as you understand the type of systems you have inside your business and the type of processes that support them, and of course, adding in the level of risk and making a plan, you're pretty much set. Because I think I already turned off the house thingy. Yeah, I did. I exited out of it. But overall, you just want to make sure you follow like the same foundational piece like I showed for the system building. Like you have the core foundation, you have the subsystems, and you have the vision. Pretty much the same thing goes with risk, but like you don't have like a repeated process to go over it. So it's just understanding the subsystems, not understand. Oh my gosh. Understanding systems, understanding that it's made out of processes. And even though it's a lot of work, you want to make sure you're going through and identifying what kind of processes have the most risk and what kind of things can you put in place to help alleviate that? Because it's not going to be perfect. There's nothing else I can really tell you to document or anything. It's just you need to understand how the business operates. You need to understand like the processes. Ask yourself the 4 questions that I have here, and if you don't see it, is delegate. What what process step can you delegate? What can you remove? What can you keep? What you can automate? And where is the risk inside of that step or the whole process? As long as you do these things, it's easier to maneuver and make a plan of action. So you're not so you're always prepared. You're always prepared. Like, I mean, no one's ever prepared for a crisis, but like you can keep a level head because you already have this stuff in place. So that's the gist of what I have for that. And that's all I got for you guys today when it comes to planning, building out systems and uncertainty. If you like this conversation, please do let me know, or if you want me to dive deeper into something, because I kept this pretty brief, but of course there's a whole lot I can go into crisis and risk management and everything. But have anything else you want me to bring up, please let me know. I'm gonna turn off this screen share because I have nothing else to show you guys. Other than that, if you want to stay in touch, feel free to join the Facebook group Business the Lazy Way. I plan to get into that after spring break. It's dead right now, but I just like open that up. But I will be putting stuff in there and more templates and all that good stuff to help you guys build out their certain things. And then also too, if you are on the email community, the email list, I also have what you see scrolling below. If you're watching a lean systems guide that helps you build out particular processes and systems based on the resources that you already have. So you can grab that at news.thelazymillennial.net. And that is all I got today. So I hope this helped. I hope you guys are making a plan, have something in risk management. If you need any tips, feel free to reach out to me. Other than that, I will see y'all next week and we'll be talking about bottlenecks.